Well, good evening, USPCA members. It's Larry Lynch, president of USPCA. Welcome you to another one of our periodic webinars to help get you through this COVID-19 period. You know, one of the bad things that happened to us this year is we had to postpone our annual conference to 2021. But we're lucky because we had really sourced some good speakers for this year's conference. One of whom is tonight's guest, Marshall Doyle. You know, and as you're getting ready to go into new things that you're doing in your business, new ways of thinking about your business, whether it's a growth, a change in strategy, or maybe it's even time to move on. You know, how do you go about doing that? And that's some of the professionalism that Marshall's going to bring to the table tonight and help share with you. So I'm not going to suck up his time, but just a reminder that I'll be monitoring questions and answers from Marshall. At the bottom of your screen, if you scroll down, you have either a Q&A box or a chat box. We watch both, doesn't matter wherever you want to ask the questions. But throw your questions in there. When he finishes his presentation, we'll get a chance to go back to those and off we go. The other reminder is too, don't worry if you don't get all the notes tonight. You know, we record this and we'll put it up on our YouTube channel for our members, probably first thing tomorrow. So on this part, I'm excited because Marshall and I have talked before, we've corresponded a lot. This is the first time we've seen each other face to face. This is the crazy world now of Zoom and all the things we do, which on one hand is annoying as the devil when you do this all day, every day. On the other hand, it's really kind of cool because people you'd never get to meet otherwise you have a chance to engage with. So Marshall, I'm excited to have you with us tonight. I know our members will be equally excited to hear all that you have to share with everybody. And as they're starting to rethink their businesses and think about what they can do, we can't wait to hear what you have to say. So at this point, Marshall, it's over to you.
Great. Well, thank you very much. I appreciate you welcoming me to the group. I hope I can add some value. I know there's a little bit of profile information that went out about me, but what you should know is I've become somewhat of an expert in acquisition, which is a strategy I use among many other strategies. So I have a relatively short presentation I'm going to run through pretty quickly, but I wanted to tell everybody that I'm prepared to share these slides with your audience. And so they'll be getting those at the end. So don't try and feverishly take notes. We're going to cover a lot of things at a real high level because of the time we have. And we're going to leave a lot of time for questions. So with that, today we're going to talk about business growth strategies. And in particular, we're going to talk about how acquisition is a very big part of your growth strategy. So you should be able to see my slides right now, and I think Larry has confirmed that. So we will get started.
See them. Nope, we're good. I see the handwritten notes, so we're off to a good
Great.
start.
So first and foremost, the reason this is handwritten is because my mind works way clearer in handwriting, and I think there's some value in not being able to, or not typing it all out, because creative minds, often need to have a whiteboard to really create good strategy. And so I leave it as a whiteboard scribble, not because I didn't want you to see I wanted you to see my terrible handwriting, but because I think it's part of the components of what we're dealing with. So with that being said, I'm going to share a couple quick models of acquisitions that I did, and then we're going to talk about why we're talking about acquisitions. So here we go. So in 2009, I purchased a small two-person company. And as you may recall, in 2009, we were in the middle of the Great Recession. And many people were suffering. Many people's businesses had really tanked. And this particular gentleman here, his name is Ernie. He ran a very successful business, small business, him and a couple employees for many years. They had about $250,000 in revenue between him and one other technician. He was taking a fairly good salary for that size of a business, $70,000. His employees making about $50,000, and he had about $50,000 in profit. He was in the aerospace industry, so servicing particularly the heat treat industry that makes parts, or is part of the process of making parts for aircraft and automotive, many other things, but aircraft in particular. So, and what his role in that was, he calibrated the ovens and the process they used to manufacture that. So just give you a real high level of the type of business. So 100% service business, very little parts, very little cost of goods. So pre-2009, he was doing about $280,000 in revenue, and that was pretty steady. And 250 was a good marginal number he was always at. he was drawing a salary of about 120K just before the recession and when the housing market dropped. His employee was making about 60K, and he was about 60K in profit at that point. And so when we look at the value of a company, typical average value is 2.5 times EBITDA, or sometimes it's referred to as discretionary earnings or cash flow. Those are the kind of the three different categories used there. And it would typically have sold for about $180,000 at that point. So post 2009 and the crash, his business dropped 40% and so his revenue dropped from 280 to 160. And he of course reduced his salary, and he kept his employee at the right salary, which I really commend him for making that commitment to his employee, who had been with him for 10, 20 years. Obviously the profit dropped, but it dropped because he lowered his salary so substantially. So, and at that point, the company value dropped to about $70,000. And so fast forward to 2020, I did buy this company, and I bought the company for $70,000. And it was a zero down deal. He didn't need the cash, and we had 36 monthly payments of about just under $2,000 a month. And so since 2010-ish is when we closed this deal, so about 10 years, we've grown those revenues to $450,000. It was a bolt-on acquisition for me. I already had an existing business. I already had a salary that was paying me. And so I didn't need to have salary come out of this particular investment. And by this time we had 3 employees, totaling about $200,000 in payroll. And our net profit was about $157,000. And so the interesting thing you might see here is the 58K, which I think I got a little scribble there, but it's 58,000 in profit, turned into quite a bit more revenue, because the multiple goes up when you have a company that's climbing in revenue. And so that's just an example of how acquisition, if done right and done at the right time, can do 2 things. It can really help someone get some value from the business in a time when it's really tanking. In this case, the owner was about 70 years old. His employee was 57 or 58, I think, 58. And so his main motive, 2 motives: 1, take care of his customers; 2, keep a job for his longstanding employee. And I think that was very commendable. So this deal enabled us to keep a guy named Gary, came on as an employee, and sometime later, a couple years ago, he retired from my company with the ability to retire with his cash flow. So that's one quick example. The next one is a recent deal that I'm just about to close. And this deal is actually, I'm partners with my daughter Samantha in this deal. And this company is about $530,000 in revenue currently. They have about $46,000 in profit, and the owner's taking about $129,000 in cash flow or discretionary earnings. And so, again, the same formula: 2.5 times seller's discretionary earnings. There's some EBITDA calculations in there. The value lands at about $250,000 or so. So I paid $258,000 for this company. The interesting thing about this is, because of the COVID situation, his revenue hadn't dropped. But again, an older gentleman, 67 years old, and he just didn't want to play the game. He's like, I'm not going to go through the uncertainty of this. I don't know what to do. And so as we started talking, I advised him to apply for the PPP loan, even though he didn't feel he needed it, because he didn't. He had cash. But he applied for that. And we actually used the PPP loan proceeds as part of the deal to close this acquisition. And in the end, he left $132,000 in cash and inventory in the business. I bought the business for $258,000, and we were able to acquire basically 5 employees and the book of business that they had. A challenge with this business that I didn't put in my notes, but is that in this industry, the COVID-19 is likely to have a effect that is delayed. So it could be a year from now when that's effective. The other thing that's worth sharing is that he was at a zoning issue with his building, and he could not go bigger than 5 employees. And so we're moving the company into a new facility and lots of investments there. But the deal enabled us to do that in a pretty simple way because of the cash that was left in the business. Most important of both of these deals is that they were both zero out of pocket money. And in both cases, the business funded the entire purchase. And the reason that's important is because there are opportunities out there, even if you don't have money, that you can take advantage of. And how do I know that? Because I've done it more than 15 times, and I've coached people through doing it as well. So why buy versus a startup? You know, if you're in a startup mode or you have your business and it's relatively small, businesses that are purchased, you know, certainly have less risk. You have some stability there. You have more financing options. You can get lending from more sources in an existing business that has a history than you can in a startup concept. You don't have to use creative investment. You don't have to borrow from your house. You don't have to do things with investors and or fund it with credit cards or however the creative way you would fund it. So there's obviously some brand recognition. They already have customers. They already have sales. They have profits. There's contacts in place there. Hopefully there's systems in the business that you could utilize. In my case, we got some systems and acquisitions, but we actually brought our systems to these customers that we had in place. You know, obviously employees. And last but not least, if this is your first business, you get a paycheck, which is very different than a startup. Those of you who have done startups, I'm sure you can relate to that. So that's why, you know, buy versus startup. The other part I would mention about that is the chance of a startup succeeding is really not very optimistic. And the chance of an existing business continuing to operate is much higher, particularly if they've gotten past 10 years. So both the examples I shared, those businesses were very mature businesses. The first business, Ernie's business, was established in 1972. The second business, Rick's business, was established by his father 68 years ago. So you can imagine the stability that is there and the predictability that is there, even in a situation with COVID. So that lowers risk and creates opportunity. So those are important pieces to understand about acquisition. Now, many of you, I'm sure, already own your own business. So you're like, why are we talking about acquisition? Well, we're talking about acquisition because there is an unprecedented opportunity in front of us right now. And there has been this opportunity long before COVID was a part of our lives. But now that the COVID-19 situation is here, it is accelerated and it is heightened. Unfortunately, in any economy, in situations where things become challenging, certain business owners, they get scared. They're fearful of what's happening. Maybe they're at a critical point in their retirement, a critical age. Maybe they already had plans to retire. And like real estate investment, business investment is the same when it comes to timing is everything when you're getting out of your business. So one of the businesses I own is a hotel. And on March 22nd, like many businesses in the hospitality industry, our hotel closed. And we were fortunate enough to reopen on the 5th of this month, so not too long ago. And we are expected to see positive cash flow about a year from now. And I can tell you that I have the, fortitude, I have the stability financially with my partner and the rest of our team to manage through that, whereas many owners won't. So let me run through some quick statistics so we can bore you for just a minute, but these are important. There's 50 million baby boomers that will retire in the next 10 years. 12 million of them own businesses. About 4.8 million of them will transition in the next 10 years because some baby boomers are on the edge, like me. I'm on the edge of the baby boomer generation. I don't plan on retiring anytime soon. Of that, we can assume that about half of them will either pass to their children or maybe to employees, or they have some sort of an internal succession plan in place, and so they will never, be put on the market. About 720,000 of them, about 30%, will close without selling. Like they won't even try to sell. They don't think they have anything to sell. And about 480,000 of them, or 20%, will actually sell their business. So that breaks down to 48,000 per year over 10 years, which is about 4,000 per month. Now, the staggering portion of this data is that right now, this was data's maybe almost a year old. At the time of this data, it was about 300 businesses were for sale every month. And this is going to take us to 4,000. So more than 10 times the amount of businesses are going to be available. A little note that's a little bit of a side note I wanted to add is that 595,000 businesses close every year. Many of those are new startups that just didn't make it. Some of them are second generation pass downs that just didn't make it through the generational change, which is very, very much a case with most businesses. There are a few businesses that are fortunate enough to go beyond 2 generations or 3 generations. In our family, we are fortunate enough to have my son-in-law, who is now 5th generation of his family toy and hobby store. And they are, I think, about 87 years right now. And so he says his job's to get him to 100. So I commend him for that. But these are stats that you should understand. There's going to be a flood of businesses available. Many of them will not sell unless buyers can understand the overwhelming opportunity we have in front of us to use businesses not only to get new buyers in and new business owners started by acquiring, but also by acquiring businesses for growth. And so I know you all are probably thinking right now, I don't have any money. Even if I have a small business, I'm squeezing every dime out of it. And if I was doing well 6 months ago, I'm not doing well now. Or perhaps I am doing well, but I just don't have cash available or lending available. I'm here to tell you that there's deals out there that are just businesses that will go out of business if they're not sold. That motivates the seller to be very creative. So obviously owner financing, that's the number one way small businesses are financed. Some investments, sometimes family will invest. Sometimes you can pull from your 401k. Sometimes you have other assets that you can use. In my case, my first business, I borrowed against my home for the down payment, and the owner carried a contract for 10 years. And that was in 1999. Funding from cash flow, if you're an existing business and you have had in the past or you're having now good cash flow, you can either sit that in a money market account and earn 0.01% interest, or you can use it to grow your existing business through additional marketing or additional equipment or maybe hiring employees, or you can look at it as a marketing strategy to acquire a competitor or to acquire an additional product that blends really well with your product. Obviously, you can use a credit card. A friend of mine bought their first business with 12 credit cards that had 90 days, no interest. But they applied for all on the same day and got approved. I think they applied for almost 20 credit cards and they got approved for 12 of them. And they used them. And in 30 days, they turned that money around into a loan and they had a business. So there's creative ways to deal with the money. Offering services for equity. That's a really good way to get into business. If you are an expert at what you do and another business is struggling, offer to help them. And if they don't have money to pay you, offer to take some equity in exchange. If you have confidence in your abilities to provide marketing or sales or consulting or whatever your magic potion is or whatever your superpower is, if you have the ability to do that, you can get ownership stake in a business for the work or consulting that you can do. Leveraging your core business assets, that would be your first business, is always an important strategy. Again, I'm going to go quick, so we're going to ask a bunch of questions afterwards. So you might ask, like, who to acquire? A big way to start, the very first place to start, if you already have your core business, is, look at new territories. If you're a chef service in Dallas, Texas, for example, and you're on the east side and there's a need on the west side, maybe there's someone on the west side that's maybe ready to be done, or maybe they didn't have as good a success through the COVID situation, or maybe they're just tired of being alone and doing it on their own and they want some help. And so you might have an opportunity to acquire or strategic partner with someone in another territory. Excuse me. The other thing is what's referred to as a complementary or a bolt-on product or service. So if you're providing, let's say you're providing in-home chef services, and they really like the spaghetti sauce you make, you could make that spaghetti sauce into a product and sell it online. So there's lots of things you can do. Or maybe you have a friend that has a great recipe for cheesecake, or there's some sort of an asset there that you could buy that product from them and then use your network to sell it. There's customer list. I learned this recently, that you can actually technically buy a Facebook group. Facebook group, and there's a little, some strategies to that. You can buy events, you can buy equipment, you can buy teams, you can buy businesses because it has the right team. That's really common in the industry that I'm in, because our techs in calibration is what I do in one of my businesses are very costly to train. So it's very difficult. That's really the place you should focus mostly, is on competitors and how you can partner with them and potentially acquire them and basically roll them into your company. And that's called a roll up. And that's what I did with my calibration company. Then once you get to where you have a good base there, you start to use outside suppliers, you start to use consultants for marketing, for accounting, for human resources. Maybe you have a really good hold on a product supplier that, because of your size now, you're buying so many products from them that they really need you. And or maybe you have a software that you either had developed or that you've been paying for, or you could buy the software company. Or you have other IT that might be a possibility. So those are some things on who you could potentially acquire and how you find it. What I will say is, don't go to bizbuy.sell. Don't go to any of the brokerage sites, because brokers, as much as they're a good place on this earth for brokers, unfortunately, they're not as creative as you could be with a buyer that's in a business that is struggling, or in a business that they're just done with. And so an important part of being successful at this is to broaden the way you find businesses available, broaden the way you have the conversations with these potential sellers of their companies. And if you can acquire them, if you can find out what their problem is that they want to solve. I have a company right now I'm negotiating. I'm in technically 6 deals right now that Samantha and I are working on together. She has the paperwork for one of them right here. So, and one of the things that we really, watch for is, like, what does the owner want? This particular deal, the owner just wanted to get paid for a few more years, a reasonable salary, or wanted that as payment. So we worked that out. Another deal we're working on, the owner wants a boat. And so I had him send me a picture of his boat that he wants, and I looked at how much it would cost to find one. I found a used one for him, and so we figure out a way to do that. So those are some creative ways to get through that. One of the things that I did for this particular situation is I put together a little brainstorming session. I did this morning, as a matter of fact, on the whiteboard, but I did take the time to type this in. You have a lot of opportunity in the food service business, and there's a lot of things you can do. And I'm not going to read through all these because I'll share them, but obviously if you're a private chef, you can do catering, you can do prepared meals, you can do meal delivery. Maybe you want to do a coffee drive up, or you have an event stand or food trucks. Maybe you have a mixologist approach, or can do something with alcohol. Shoot, maybe you can buy a liquor store if you're selling a lot of alcohol in a bar, so keep your costs down for your bar. So there's lots of things you can do. This is going to be shared with you guys, so you can see a little bit of the creativity that's possible as you're doing this type of growth for your business. So, how do you get started really is, first you got to have a core business, and you got to understand how that works. Now, you can buy your core business like I did, and then as long as it has the right service or the right product that you can scale, then you can start working on how you can do that. So research your competitors, find other businesses that also serve those customers. Maybe they do something different but closely related. Finding related products or services, it's a very important way to deal with that. The other way you can help to acquire is to offer services, advise them, consult them, give them referrals, maybe partner with them on some projects. You're starting to build a relationship with them. And then, of course, reach out. I said don't go to biz, buy, sell, but now I'm going to contradict that, because I'm going to tell you to go to biz, buy, sell and look for businesses that you would likely be interested in that are in like some crazy area of the country that you wouldn't do, and just start researching. What types of businesses are there? What are they asking for them? What's the kind of data you can get? If you find some that, even if you're not interested, contact the broker and get the financials and take a look at them and practice. Just practice on one that doesn't matter if you can't close it. Get to know the sellers. The more you know them, the more you understand what they are trying to solve, or what they want to move their life to. The most important piece. I think baby boomers are the number one target that you should be looking at, because that's a group you can help the most based on the stats. Many of them will not have a successful sell their business. And so if you can help people, that's just icing on the cake. And at the same time, you can keep their legacy going, and you can make some good money off of acquisition. So, and then tell them you want to work together. So those are some ideas there. Again, real high level, trying to get this, done as quickly as I can so we can get to some questions. Larry warned me that you guys ask a lot of questions. I hope that wasn't inside information, Larry. But so my name is Marshall Doyle. I'm with Small Business Coaching LLC. My daughter Samantha and I coach businesses through acquisitions, through selling their companies. And if I can be of any help to anybody, there's an email here. Shoot us an email. We'd be happy to help.
And Marshall will be getting that out as well. So, one of the first questions that popped up, and I thought, it's relevant because it kind of ties to some of the things I wanted to ask you about as well, is what does that have to do with personal chef business? And I think you really addressed it there towards the end. But I think it's interesting where people, I think, don't think, and we can talk about this some more, about acquisition as a solution to how they want to change out their business. I've been doing the same thing. I'm in a rut. I don't know what I'm going to do and how I'm going to get there. I think the challenge that some of our members would have is that, okay, I'm in a rut. So my next natural inclination is, because my passion is around food, is maybe I'm going to cook a different kind of food, or maybe I'll do a slight alteration to an audience. But in this particular case, we talk about acquisition. Oftentimes it's about alignment. You talk about meeting competitors, and I'll give you a side story because I've been through mergers and acquisitions myself. A lot of our members know that I'm affiliated with the National Restaurant Association, and I am because the Restaurant Association bought the former company I had that I had an interest in. And they bought it because it was perfectly aligned with the future vision of where they wanted to go. And then, of course, I happen to have the skill set that they wanted to get that there. So it was recognizing that they could fight an uphill battle and develop it all themselves, take the chance, or buy a ready-made business, and really in the long run, you probably save a lot of your investment costs or your development costs by just buying the company. So all that said, if I was to go back to a personal chef, what's the real selling point to them to go down this road of acquisition rather than looking at incremental small steps to growing their personal chef business?
That's a great question. I think, when people think of acquisition, they're thinking big, they're thinking big companies do that, right? The people that have money, lots of investment, capital and venture, whatever, are investing. What I'm trying to address here is that the small entrepreneur is not taking advantage of those investments that the larger investor is. So businesses that are worth under $100,000, they're just closing up shop, and that when they're done. And businesses that are trying to grow and scale a business, even if you've been in business for several years, the cost of growing it, the cost of marketing, that digital space that's so crowded, you have to spend so much time with like digital marketing, with influencer marketing. The cost is really prohibitive. And generally, rule of thumb that I've always used, and I've been told this is accurate, I use it, it works for me, is that about 15% of my gross revenue has to go to marketing. And if I am going to put a campaign together to gain another $10,000, it's going to cost me $150, to get that money, or it's going to cost me 10 or 15%. So if you could take that money and instead of marketing digitally or sending flyers out or however you're marketing and getting 1, 2, 3, maybe 5% return on that, you could take that money and invest it in another company that's ready to exit. And depending on the industry, and the food service might not be as good as the industries that I've been in, but depending on the industry, you're likely to get 80% retention of those customers. And if you already know it's a $50,000 a year company and you can get 40,000 of it by investing $4,000 a year for 3 years, I mean, why would you not do that?
Yeah, so, it's all about the incremental revenue at that point.
Exactly, and it's a proven method of marketing that always gives you better results than any other method of marketing.
Yeah.
And so interestingly enough, so I took my first business that I bought in 1999 from about 350,000 in revenue, and we're pushing close to 10 million in revenue. And I can tell you, I'm not a marketer. I don't know how to market. And we barely market, but we bought a lot of our competitors out. And so that's how we chose to market. Now we take care of our customers, we get word of mouth, all those things, but acquisition was a proven method. And I didn't know it was a proven method until I did it at least 3 times. The first time it was like, I hope these are, Cal-Cert's company or customers, not Fred's customers, because Fred was the owner. And, when I bought out Bill in 2005, I hoped the same thing, that they were his company and not his customers. And we kept almost 100% of them. And so, and each time we did it, it happened. And so I know in my industry it works. And as we started dabbling in other industries and started coaching with other business owners in other industries, it works. It just works. So I hope that answers the question. That was a really long answer.
It does. And I do want to come back to the competitor strategy, but one of the questions that popped up, and I think it's an interesting one, because you talked about the baby boomers and people getting ready to exit their businesses, and I would say we've got some balance on both sides of that balance sheet in our organization. So one of our members is asking, so what are the things you need to do to set your business up to sell?
Well, there's lots of things. I think first and foremost, you have to make sure you have very clear financial statements. If you've been trying to do the bookkeeping and the trade of your business, pay a bookkeeper. It's not that expensive. You can have good financials. I can tell you, I've looked at so many businesses that are great businesses. They're doing a great job, but they don't understand the profit and loss statement. They don't understand the balance sheet and how important equity is and how they manage things. And not only is the effect of that reduced value and reduced, desire for a buyer to buy that because they got to clean that mess up, is oftentimes there's tax strategies that they didn't take, and they were really having problems with their taxes. And so one of the strategies that we use when we buy a business is we go back and look at the tax returns from the previous years to see if we can refile them, to see if we can find some tax savings. And most of the time you do. And because, someone who's a chef or whatever your trade is, your plumber, whatever you're doing, I know this is a chef group or a food service group, right? Whatever your trade is, you have a better chance of making money and increasing the value of your company if you stay in that trade there, or you scale it to a point where you can manage a team that's doing that for you, and outsource those things that aren't your superpower, and understand that. And so bookkeeping is the number one thing that I would say is a recommendation for people to do that. So that's one. Obviously, there's things you can do to systemize your business. There's things you can do to build proprietariness to it. I know my dad was a chef. And so I remember my dad, he wouldn't write a recipe down to save his life, and he wouldn't measure anything either. So, but somehow he managed to make food taste the same fabulous food that it always was every time. And I know you're all like that, but that doesn't help the next person. So if you can get some of those things systemized, and there's a book or well, these days, PDF or whatever to do that, that's a good way of valuing it. If you have brick and mortar, make sure it's clean, organized, systemized, make sure you're training your team. If you're big enough to have a team doing things, do your best to get out of the team. My business, my calibration business, I don't run it. I mean, I used to run it, but I don't run it. I'm just the visionary and the strategy person. I have a 6-person leadership team that runs the company, and quite honestly, they do a better job than I was. So, because I'm a visionary, and my daughter in our coaching business, she runs it, and I'm just the visionary. I got a lot of content in my head, and she sucks it out of my head. So that's really what happens. So use that, use your team and make sure it's systemized. And the number one thing that if everybody could take one thing away from what we talk about today in increasing the value of your company, the number one thing that I think is important is every single day when you look at your business, make sure you're looking through the eyes of a potential buyer. What is that buyer going to see? What are they going to think? I own a hotel, one of the businesses I own. Our housekeeping room was a disaster. The floor was getting dry rotted. There was cabinets that were all beat up. And I have a partner in that business. And I'm like, we've got to remodel this room. And he's like, why? It's back of the house. Nobody sees it. I'm like, it still works. I'm like, because in the buyer's eyes, this looks unorganized. It doesn't look as valuable as it is. Now, we don't have any intention of selling the place. But if you look at that, you are creating efficiencies. You are creating a presentation. So always look at your business through the eyes of a potential buyer and make decisions on that.
I mean, it's almost, if you think about it from an analogy standpoint, it's like buying and selling a house. If you're going to sell your house, you're not going to sit there with stuff all over the place and junk everywhere and dirty dishes. You're going to make sure that the thing is spotlessly clean. It's not a huge investment. What you're doing is organizing, you're structuring, you're cleaning, you're moving. Mm-hmm. But to your point, you want to think about everybody who walks in there as a potential buyer, and they want to see that home as their home. And the moment they make that emotional connection, mm-hmm. the buy process begins.
Well, and not only that, if you look at it through the eyes of a buyer and you want to be proud of your business, what's going to happen that you don't even realize is you're going to create efficiencies you didn't even know needed to be created by making sure that through the eyes of the buyer, it looks good. And, the thing that I learned long ago is, business owners tend to brag about their gross revenues. I could care less about my gross revenues. I don't care what they are, because I'm in it for investment. I want to take care of the people. I want to have something I'm proud of. I want to make sure that, my integrity is strongly in place. Those all things they have to be there. We genuinely care. That's one of our core values. We're a driven company. That's one of the things we hold as a core value. We're innovative. Those are things that are important. So once those are in place, really paying attention to, making this a profit first business is very important. In fact, there's a great book. I forget the author, but it's called Profit First. And it's a great read. It's not very long. In fact, you can get it on, Audible or whatever and listen to it. It's a great read. And the guy's a little crazy how he's going to tell you to do it. And so I don't really recommend 15 bank accounts, but the concept is really good because the traditional accounting method is gross revenue, expenses, and keep what's left. And his concept is gross revenue, take your profit, manage with what's left. It's a good concept. So that helps you increase your value of your company.
Good one. We'll have to make sure everybody picks up a copy of that book.
Yeah,
Some of the questions that popped up. He said, have you ever used business credit to buy any companies in the past?
I have used business credit. I've done one SBA loan. And I did that for the hotel. It was a real estate place, so there's a lot of assets there, which SBA likes. It's a good program. I believe in the SBA, and I have some good relationships there because of my board membership on some other things. But it's interestingly enough, about 25% of the SBA loans that are applied for in this country actually get loans. So it's a very low percentage because many businesses, especially service businesses, really aren't lendable. And I know in the food service, it's really complicated because they won't lend on lots of things for that. But I have used that. I've used credit lines. In this latest case, I'm using the PPP money. And I got some PPP money for one of my businesses that's still doing okay. We're still using our credit line to manage cash flow. We did have a dip, but we're managing it. I've got that kind of set aside for an acquisition if I need to have the cash. But the biggest way to invest is to find a buyer that is motivated, that is a business that, maybe looks really broken on the outside, but you have the skills or the ability or the infrastructure or the team or whatever to make that a not broken company and bring it back. Every company that I purchased was a turnaround. And if you get good at turning around, if you're good at running your business, you can be good at turning a business around. So that's how you invest in with, very little money. And motivated sellers, they're creative. And
my favorite acronym, OPM, other people's money.
Other people's money, absolutely. And honestly, I can tell you real quick, I bought a company that I was really flush with cash. I'm getting a little older, so I'm like, I don't want a long note payable. So, I put a lot of money down on this business, and I did a short note payable. And lo and behold, I got away from my model, and it about kicked my behind because, the payments were too much. I depleted my cash too much. There were some unforeseen things in the business acquisition that I didn't, they had to pay for. And, it was tough. It was really tough. So, understand the model, learn the model, and it'll lead you in the right direction. But the thing I wanted to touch on, talking about, well, how does it relate to someone who's, maybe just a one person company that's just going and, cooking at someone's house or however, whatever the business is. You can do little things. I mean, you can buy a Facebook group for $300, that gives you 5,000 people that are your people that want your message. You can add a training or a cooking show or whatever, that you can do as an extra revenue stream for a couple $1,000s as an acquisition, and it's there. So you can relate it and get multiple revenue streams and still stay in the passion where you're at.
Yeah, Chef said, it sounds to me like you're using the same method as McDonald's founder Ray Kroc.
It's similar. It is similar. I like his model. Obviously, Warren Buffett is a big hero of mine. I've eaten in his steakhouse a few times, not his steakhouse, but the one that he has his board meetings in. It's called Gore Tots. It's in Omaha.
Some time in Tulsa. Okay, no, you're out in the Midwest there.
Yeah, it's in Omaha. I live in Portland, but my business is
yeah.
So, and I asked one of our customers, what's the best place to get a steak in town? He's like, oh, we'll go where Warren Buffett goes. So I did. And it wasn't expensive either. It was a good steak. But yeah, Warren Buffett, has a good philosophy there. And then, someone that I'm a big fan of right now that's, in this acquisition world is a guy named Roland Frazier. If you looked up Roland Frazier, you'd find him. He's a big time acquiring guy. And he's, I've mentored with him a little bit. And, I'm not in this to get rich. This is just fun. I mean, it's fun for me. And, more importantly that it creates opportunities for my team. My two kids, I have two, a daughter, Samantha, and my son, and they're both, in the business. And Samantha and I started buying businesses together. She's my boss in the coaching business. And my son's going to be my boss. We're buying an IT company right now. At least we're heading towards that direction. And, he'll likely be my boss in that company. And I'll just be a minority owner that's there to help guide him. So creating opportunities for others really helps.
That's being the right kind of employee.
Yeah. I mean, you can really go bad with your family sometimes, but you can also go really good. And
you figured that part out. So
yeah, my wife's an accountant, and she's like, I don't want anything to do with any of that stuff. I mean, she's like, you guys, whatever.
Too close for comfort.
Yeah. So I mean, you follow your passion. If you can make a good living at it, doing what you love, and you can help others, I mean, why not do it? It's a lot of fun.
A couple questions in chat I want to throw at you that I'm going to ask them in reverse order. First is, when looking for a business, what type of profit margin do you look for?
So I look for at least 15% profit. If it's lower than that, I'm okay. It really varies by industry. A service business that has really low overhead, maybe is a home-based business, is going to have a lot more profit than that. But the businesses I tend to invest in have a lot of assets, so they have a lot of equipment. They need infrastructure, brick and mortar. They need some of those things, which, that's some of those businesses got killed. But when you go into like a digital business, something like that, I mean, 40% probably, but more important than that, what I really look for is what profit is in there that they're not able to pull out that I can. And because you can buy it at their profit level and then turn it into your profit level. And so I think that's almost more important than where they're at on profit. But you have to make sure there's enough cash flow to pay for the deal. They got to be able to pay the payment with some cushion,
So saying that brought up kind of a side question. When you have those situations where you're looking at a company, you're valuing, you look at profit and so forth, you do through all this work with due diligence, how do you protect yourself when something goes south after the deal is done?
Well, that's a really important piece. Structuring the deal right from the beginning is really a key to that. Obviously, as a seller, you're taking some risk if you're carrying a note with a buyer. And so, buyers, there's some people out there that won't, they won't follow through with what they're doing. And so you have to be really careful about the diligence when you're looking at buying a company, because what happened in that company isn't always as transparent as it should be. And so obviously you look at financials, you look at human resource work, you look at any lawsuits, you look at any UCC filings on the company. But mostly it's asking a series of questions that are all the same question said in a different way, because it'll lead you to an answer. And I bought one company, they lost their largest customer 3 months before I bought the company. I couldn't tell because there was still income on the sheet, on the stuff with them and the schedule. And I found out about 2 weeks later that it was 10% of their business. And of course, I was like, and I got, I think eight employees with that business. And so I talked to the crew and I said, look, we got to get this customer back. and so we really worked hard to do that, and we did. But what I could have done is gone back and said, you misrepresented and you didn't disclose this, because it was clear that that's what happened. But I chose to just not do it and figure I'll just take care of it myself. And so the due diligence process is big. And on smaller deals, I do the due diligence myself. My wife used to do some of the due diligence when we were doing smaller deals. My vice president of one of my companies, Cal-Cert, she's really good at the legal side, the insurance side, and the operational side. And so she would be involved. But when you get into a bigger deal, I mean, gosh, if you have a virtual CFO or a CPA that can help you with that, as far as the financial side and the liability side. The other thing that really helps with due diligence is anywhere you possibly can, do an asset purchase. And because you stop the clock on anything that they did, unscrupulously or illegally or against the IRS, because they're responsible for anything there. If you do a stock purchase, you inherit all that. And so I've done some stock purchases, and sometimes there's a valid reason to do that. In that case, you got to do really good due diligence. So I have checklists. That we've built over the years, and I can tell you every time we do a deal, we add something to the checklist because we missed something. And so hope that answers.
Yeah, and I know Chef Adam will kill me if I don't get to his question, which I will, but I'm going to do a follow-up to that, because I don't think all of our members really understand the difference between an asset sale and a stock sale.
Okay.
I've been through both, and you don't realize, you think you've got really sophisticated business people, and I'm explaining to them oftentimes, no, this is an asset sale, and this is what it means, or this is a stock sale. Maybe you can just take a moment just to explain the difference between the two.
Sure. Well, I mean, the basics of it is, if you're in a stock sale, you're going to buy the business as it stands. You're going to keep the same tax ID number. The employees are going to get paid the same. You're just going to transfer the ownership at the Secretary of State's website to you, and you bought the stock and everything that came with it: the cash, the accounts receivable, the accounts payable, the inventory, all the equipment, all the people, and all their baggage, right? The human resource files, all that stuff. And the advantage of a stock sale for a buyer is that if you have licensing or contracts with customers or things that are of value, it might offset the risk of the stock sale. And in fact, this latest deal, we did a stock sale for that reason. They're in a grandfathered building that they can only do business in as a grandfather. It's a residential building they've been in for 68 years. And in order to do business there, it has to be the same business. So we bought the stock. And but asset purchase is you go in and you kind of pick and choose what you're buying. You get some of the equipment. Maybe you get the accounts receivable. Maybe you don't. Maybe it's a clear balance sheet. They take the accounts receivable. They can't take the accounts payable, all the cash. And you're just buying their customer list, maybe their equipment, maybe some software or some other intellectual property. And what I like about asset sales in a roll-up is if I have the infrastructure to run the business and I just buy another couple $100,000 and book of business for service, for calibration, then I'm just buying that book of business. I roll it right into my company as my company name, the existing parent company. And it's way simpler in some aspects, but stock purchase can be way simpler in some aspects too. So, but most buyers want to do asset and most sellers want to do stock, and that's a tax implication because asset sales, you get a higher capital gains tax, although with our current tax rate, it's actually more favorable than it has been in a long time. It's like 21%, used to be 39%. And so, and then the other advantage, massive advantage on asset purchases, if you buy a company that has a lot of equipment, you get to start your depreciation over on that equipment, which means you get to write that equipment off again. As far as stock purchase, you don't get to write it off again, and whatever is depreciated is already depreciated. So I hope that answers. There's a lot of answers to that question.
It does. I mean, it's taking something that's technically kind of complex and trying to get it down to something simple. But it really does come down to I'm either buying the whole thing or I'm buying parts of it, and I think that tends to be
correct.
Yeah,
a lot more flexibility with asset purchases.
Yeah, and I said done both, so I understand. So Chef Adam asked, I want to get to that. How much of a percentage should we expect with a good financial service or an accountant? And then with that, how much percentage should we expect to pay for marketing?
For buying a business or for running?
I'm going to ask Chef to put a little clarifying note in here for us so I can get that. Yeah, it's great. I'm not sure which end of the spectrum we're asking here, if it's the buy or sell side. But
well, so
go ahead.
We'll give them a chance to answer it. I'll just answer it one way, and then if it's the other, we'll do it. So when you're buying a business, you know, if a business is for sale through a broker, you know, the selling business is going to pay some sort of a brokerage fee. It's usually a minimum amount, usually $10,000 or 10%. And so if you're a small business, that's obviously very prohibitive to do that. And of course, if you're a large business, that's a lot of money, right? And as a buyer, you don't pay a brokerage fee, but let me tell you, you're paying that fee. I mean, they've calculated in there, but you're still going to pay for a good value. So hopefully that added it. As far as accounting and legal in a transaction, you're going to pay $3,000 to $10,000 for financial documents to get done. For legal documents to get done on, you know, a big deal. Those little deals that are 100,000, 200,000, you can do those yourself. I mean, there's some things you can do. You can use LegalZoom. You can do those things. That's one of the things that Samantha and I do. We offer that. We have templates that attorneys have written for us, and we repurpose them and for smaller deals. And we help the client, you know, use those templates. And so it saves a substantial amount of money, because if you're going to pay $3,000 to get an attorney to write you paperwork, you can probably get them to review it for $500 and get the same value if it's already written. So that's the legal side. Accounting side, gosh, I don't know. Just depends on what you have them do. And it depends on how good your books are, you know, from your own. A lot of times there's an audited book request sometimes. I don't do that with small deals because it's too expensive. They don't do it. And so I just get tax returns and in due diligence. I don't get tax returns until due diligence, because I can understand the financials well enough to understand where the value is and what questions to ask. And when you get into due diligence, I mean, you can back out anytime you want. You find something you like, you can like it, I'm out, or you can adjust the price, renegotiate completely. You know, so you have a lot of leeway there.
And actually that may help, because then Chef wrote back and he said, what percentage should I, and we're pretty close, I think, what percentage should I expect to pay my CFO or accountant for my business now to help me be better? You mentioned having a good financial person now a few times.
Well, I don't think it's really in a percentage. Depending on where you're at and what you're doing, bookkeeping services are pretty reasonably priced. For a business, I'll use one example of one of our businesses we just bought, 500,000 in revenue. I don't know how many invoices they were doing, but they were paying around $5,000 a year for their bookkeeping service to do the transactions. And I think that included their CPA fee, which was probably $1,500 for their taxes and stuff. As you get bigger, more complicated, it gets more expensive. I think if you have a good CPA that understands business and finance, just do an extra meeting with them, and ask them to explain, the financials and what you should be paying attention to. Ask them to explain how the equity is building and what it looks like from a profit standpoint. And there's lots of coaches out there. We coach on some of that stuff as well, but there's lots of coaches out there you can engage with that understand the financials enough or have resources to do that. It shouldn't cost you very much money. It shouldn't cost you a percentage. So I don't know.
One of the creative things we did with the Personal Chef Association when I first got working with it was we put together a strategic advisory board. And I had a strong CPA, a financial advisor, a marketing guy, an M&A guy, and I shouldn't say guys and gals. And basically, I bought dinner once a quarter, and we spent an evening going through all the plans, talking about the strategies, laying things out. I mean, I still have a bookkeeper that I pay on a monthly basis. It's not at all costly, and I'm pretty good at finance, so that doesn't hurt any either. But the group was able to really sit down, really tear apart our marketing thinking, really hit us on some of the ideas from a financial planning perspective. And it was the cost of a dinner, which to me was minimal for getting great advice. Plus, I had all these experts together at the table, so they could compare with each other. So I didn't have to sit there with disparate discussions that didn't connect. Rather, the group could play off each other, and we got some great ideas off of working that way.
Right. Well, anytime an association can bring a group together, I mean, more minds are better than one, always. As you know, I'm friends with Deb Cantrell, with Chef Deb, and she does a coaching program, and she's really good at pulling strategy together for lots of different things that I don't understand. And I think, that's one way you can get value. The other thing that is a resource that you guys should all know about, and this is probably something worth writing down, if you don't know about the small business development centers.
I was just going to say it.
I sit on the board of directors, I guess it's the state advisory board is what they call it, for Oregon. There's 19 centers in Oregon, but they're all over the country. It's Small Business Development Center, and you Google that, you'll find it. They offer free counseling. That's their mandate. They're funded by SBA. They're funded by usually local colleges or universities. And then they usually get some state funding as well. And so you can get free counseling there. And then they have classes. They have QuickBooks classes. They have marketing classes. They have, in Oregon, they have like a small business development class. And so I would encourage anybody who's not getting any coaching or any kind of guidance from anybody, look them up. It's a really low cost, if no cost, to you. And they usually have a CPA that's there on like a volunteer basis that will actually sit down and go through your books with you and say, you should be looking at this. You should be looking at this. This looks too high. And so I would strongly recommend that.
Yeah, if you can always go back and watch this video again, but if you can't remember small business development, I think SBDC, because it's the other, they go by the acronym and easy to find. And I'll have to double check because I actually had links up on the website at what point to SBDC. We've done work with them.
In Oregon, it might be their national one. I think it's bizcenter.org.
Yes.
Is what it is, bizcenter.org. And a great organization. Honestly, to be really candid with you, I mean, in 2002, my business was completely upside down. I was 5 quarters behind on payroll taxes, and we were nearly bankrupt. And I went to the SBDC, and that's when I started to learn how to run businesses. And that's when I think we were at close to $1 million in revenue then. And I was getting killed. I mean, I couldn't make money. And so they really helped turn me around, and I've had 4 mentors through them. Now I pay, high dollars for, private coaching. But I'm still engaged with them. I'm really good friends with the director and my local center that I go with, and I still take his class. So I've learned a few things from him still. So, but yeah, I'd highly recommend that. And they, they know some stuff about acquisition. They know some stuff about strategies. And let me tell you, they've got some grants. They've got some funding for things where you can get a lot of help right now. I was just on that committee, as I mentioned, it was yesterday, and they were talking about how they have money to spend on helping small businesses. And, I'm advocating for the hospitality industry, the food service industry, the nails people, the hair people, all those services businesses are just getting killed right now. Those are the businesses that really need help. And so reach out to them. I mean, you never know. You can ask and you can get some help that you didn't even expect was there.
So Marshall, believe it or not, we hit our hour plus already.
It always goes fast, doesn't it?
When it gets engaged like that, I appreciate it because, it's a topic we often don't talk about, because I think when people think about where they're going with their business, it's often within the framework of that trade versus, are there other things I can do? Are there ancillary touch points? I mean, I think we all want to grow to the point with our businesses where we can retire comfortably, enjoy life. In your case, have a couple of kids who can take it over and run it. You can be their employee, and it's all good. And I think the flip side of that is the ability to sell, because the other thing too is that, is there that piece of me that says, oh, I'm just going to back out of the business. And I hear that from our members who say, oh, I'm not going to renew my membership this year. I've decided to close my business. And I always wonder how much money they're leaving on the table. And I'll kind of close that with this from my own experience. When it says, am I leaving something on the table? It's really getting to know your competitors, because I think oftentimes people think, oh, this whole competition thing, I got to figure out how I'm going to beat them in the marketplace. And I've always been one who has held out to try and get to know my competitors well and figure out if there's anything I can do to work well with them. And with the other company that we sold to the Restaurant Association, they were the behemoth by far. I mean, 100 times our size, but always reached out. We may have been David to their Goliath, but I was determined. And you don't know what kind of ironic things are going to happen. I was at a conference in San Francisco, and they just brought on a new guy to head up their certification business, which is what I ran as a separate company. And turns out the two of us worked together at Disney. And we connected at the coffee break and started talking. And I told him about what I've been trying to do for a number of years and what he was thinking. And long story short, we started having discussions about other ways that we could work together. He called me one day and he said, you guys ever sell? And that started the due diligence process. So I would argue, keep an open mind. Think broadly, think about not just where your business is today, but other ways of doing it. Like you said, it doesn't have to be a full-blown change of your business. It might be that ancillary piece that you don't do well, but could grow your business, that by a small acquisition could bring it on. So Marshall, thank you. I think it was.
Thank you. That was great advice. And I would just like to leave with, if anybody wants to continue the conversation, you've got an email, just drop us an email. If you have questions you just want answered, we'll do our best to answer them. If you want to chat with us, let us know, and we'll make arrangements to help anybody we can.
Marshall, that's awesome. And again, this will be up on YouTube tomorrow. And so if you can't find, I'll send Marshall's information out as well. And Marshall, as always, my thanks to you. I know it's getting dinner time in the West Coast, so I want to give you that time back so you can take advantage of that. And my thanks to your daughter for working with us on the technology piece of this tonight.
Yeah, she's an integral part for sure. Yeah. Without her, I couldn't do it without her, and I wouldn't.
Well
right.
said.
Thanks a lot. Good
night, everybody. We'll see you next time.
Choose to do this again.
You got it. Bye.
All right. Bye-bye.